Next, we have a contributed talk by Professor Atkeson. Today, he will be giving a talk on optical skin for robots, tactile sensing, and whole body vision.
What do we got here?
This is what
Yes.
15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm Chris Atkeson. I'm going to give a short talk. I was asked to explain, so I don't know anything about tactile sensing, and I'm invading the field. I apologize. There are two reasons why I'm interested in tactile sensing. The first is I believe we will never be able to put Terminator robots in a home safely. Kids will tackle it, will fall on them and crush them, same with pets. So I believe the wave of the future is balloon robots. I've come up with a new way of funding research. I have a website. It has a donate button. Please go to it. Please donate. This is Baymax from the Disney movie Big Hero 6. So all of you who want to build Baymax for real, that's the page. Press the donate button. The guy who's actually building Baymax is in the back there. Ji-Young Kim, and you can talk to him about how that's going. But if you're going to build a balloon robot, you have nothing but skin. There isn't anything else. And if it's going to feel, you got a lot of skin to work with. So that's one challenge. The second issue was at the Dartmouth Robotics Challenge, all these robots had to get out of the car. It turned out getting out of the car is the hardest thing to do because it involved contact all over your body. And the robots we worked with, pretty much everybody else worked with, couldn't feel a thing. That made getting contact-rich strategies really, really hard. And we actually used a bump-and-go strategy to get out of the car. We flopped our way out of the car. And it was very difficult. We couldn't figure out what the contact is. Another robot from CMU, Chimp, actually got hung up on the car in an unexpected way. And the operator had no idea what was going on. It took a couple minutes to sort of randomly jiggle around and get out. Okay. Since I'm invading the field, I am picking up on decades of pre-existing research using optical techniques. That's the gel site you just saw. There's plenty of other stuff that goes way before that, as well as decades of research where you put, for example, single pixel cameras, these are infrared rangefinders all over your body, and see obstacles. And the idea I'm pushing is, let's turn everything into a computer vision problem. I'm big on Windows. The distinction between what we're doing and pretty much everybody else is, we don't have that opaque layer that sort of blocks the camera behind it from seeing what's out there. And instead of pressing the sensor to your head and say, I got hair, yes, let's just use a camera to see the hair. And what that allows you to do is basically, for manipulation, orient whatever you're doing before you touch it. After you've touched it, it's way too late. Okay, and let's get radical. Let's say we're going to have, in the spirit of the single pixel cameras, let's have full-blown cameras all over your body and just get rid of occlusion, at least to the extent we can. Why is optical skin, which by the way many people are pursuing, a good idea? It's trivial to get millions of sensors. Biological systems, you have roughly 1 million basically tactile sensors. I can get a megapixel camera and I'm done. The bonus is I get this sensing at a distance. I'm not sure what kind of dog they're torturing out there, but the absolutely critical thing is that with optical techniques, we separate deformation and the measurement device. Why is that important? Because wires and solder connections, or any connector, cannot tolerate continual flexing. Okay? Robotics is the science of connectors. That's what fails. In the Dark Robotics Challenge, we actually tried a bunch of tactile sensors. They all failed very rapidly. I was amused to see yesterday on Facebook, which is where I get all my information, there was this soft artificial heart that they built. And basically it pumped for roughly 30,000 times. Digits really don't matter. And then it failed. And that's about 45 minutes. So everything fails when you flex. You've got to have the ability to rip off the skin and put a new one on. It's got to be cheap, and that can't be $1 million operation. Each person in this room replaces their skin once a month. Okay, that's what we're aiming for. Okay. All right, I'm going to show you some movies. I'm going to start with not touching anything. Here we're showing, these are, the fingers have transparent windows that are made out of elastomer. We're using cameras, but the bonus here is we can do things like center on the object you're trying to pick up without touching it. I believe we should generalize the notion of tactile sensing so it's sort of like tactile sensing at a distance. This is really interesting because in optimization for planning for contact, there's a school that says we should turn all contacts into soft contacts and actually have forces at a distance, and that allows us to do planning. Here I'm implementing virtual forces at a distance. Okay, here we're actually going to touch the thing. These videos are pretty much like Ted's videos or everybody else's videos with an optical sensor. You have an elastomer material. You have little markers. We track them. What we also have, which is fantastically useful, is we see the object. We don't have to have a high resolution map of the indentation of the object because we see the object. It's got all the features it's got. We can also, because we can see the object, manipulate things like that origami crane at force levels that we can't measure from deflection of the elastomer. Okay, why? Because we get slip from optic flow. Okay, and that's way, way more sensitive than anything you're going to get out of a reasonable elastomer. And we can implement various strategies where you fight with a robot and it fights back. Tug of war, if it feels a slip, here it's going to drop Baymax. Very, very sad. You're going to drop Baymax. Thank you. Here now, basically, when it detects optical slip or optic flow, it grasps tighter. We successfully pick up Baymax, which is, of course, our objective. Here we're having tug of war with a marshmallow. Eventually the robot's going to crush the marshmallow because the strategy is very stupid. It just keeps grasping more every time it detects slip. You could obviously have a smarter strategy, but this shows, what can you do with optic flow. Now, I'm obviously not the first person to think about putting cameras on robots. There are lots of examples of cameras all over robots. In fact, thousands of years ago, in Greek mythology, there was the watchman Argus who had 100 eyeballs. In Japanese sort of mythology, there's a demon that haunts temples. He has 100 eyeballs. Let's do it. Let's put 100 eyeballs on our robots. We're winning because the cell phone market is just, basically they keep wanting to make little tiny cameras on your cell phones, and they keep wanting to make cell phones smaller and smaller. So, here's the nice little graph showing cameras getting smaller. The smallest camera that I know of is a cubic millimeter, sorry. The only problem is it costs $2,000, but it's great. These are ants taking a selfie, so they're happy. Everybody's happy. Now, in reality, I'm not going to spend $2,000 on a camera. This is the less than $50 market. It's really, the size of the camera is really the size of the lens. Okay, this is all about lenses. So this is a M12, a 12 millimeter lens. You get a bigger board. You go down to an M7, smaller board. This is an M6. It's a different kind of lens. Unfortunately, these guys are fisheye lenses, which I really like. You see a lot of stuff. You don't have to have more cameras. Unfortunately, when you go to this size, you really can't get a fisheye lens, so that's a problem we need to solve. This, by the way, is, if you rip everything off, that's just the imaging chip. That's the size cameras are going to be in 2 years. All the cell phone manufacturers want to make this as thin as possible. What stops them shrinking your cell phone is the size of the lens. So people are pushing a technology called flat cameras, lensless cameras, where essentially what it is you turn this imager into lots of little tiny cameras with lots of little tiny lenses, and then you computationally build the big high-resolution image. So you're trading off physical computation in this big lens to basically information computation or computer computation, and you get rid of the lens. As Ted said, that's not all of the optical path. You also have to sort of aggregate photons from a big space, so that's not going to go away, but we are losing roughly, for this camera, a centimeter of height when we go to a flat camera. Okay, so a couple of other key ideas I want to stress. We've got to go beyond just using a single sensor. If you want to detect humans, infrared cameras, which are now $200 a pop and tiny, are trivial. There's a depth camera. You can easily put a Connect on your fingertip. You can also easily put a Connect all over your body. That's a Connect, the size of a fingertip. We could do radar. That would be fantastic. Electroreception. I'll show you a fun picture. This is something where optical techniques, where you basically have a window instead of an opaque layer, totally win. I can track what hairs and whiskers are doing with no instrumentation. This is really cheap. It's a camera and a bunch of little silicone hairs embedded in some plate. Okay? I challenge any other technique to do this for less than 50 bucks. Okay. Let's be controversial. I believe in tactile sensing, it's far more important to have a robust sensor than either be accurate or even care what the sensor measures. I don't care what the sensor measures, I just need it to work. Proximity sensing is really useful, maybe more useful than tactile sensing or contact sensing. As I said, let's all be computer vision people. It's very sad Ted's going the other way, but might like that. Everybody says there is no way you can do whole body vision. It'll require, too many supercomputers, too many watts. I believe we can come up with attention, region of interest, or detecting surprise to cut down on the processing. And let's face it, computers will be free. Energy will be free. Heat will go away. It's all good. As was mentioned earlier, skin mechanics are really, really important. Flat cameras are good. Sensing is everything. Learning AI is all secondary. If you have a decent sensor, the problem's easy. That's what we learned from the automatic driving folks. That LiDAR solves all your problems. Okay. Manipulation is everything. What do I mean by that? I mean having a tactile sensor, and this was actually said before, that makes, all it does is do tactile sensing, but it can't be used for anything. That's not so good. Manipulation, we need lots of crappy sensors. I emphasize crappy. This is sort of bitching and moaning about the people who design hands. I've looked at 30 years of hand design. Everybody's replicating the shape of your hand with hard shells. Nobody cares about what the shape of your hand is. We need to go back to building skeletal hands with gooey stuff on the outside. Okay? To take a hand that I was involved in, the Utah MIT hand, very famous hand, I actually have one. You touch it, it's like this total caricature of a robot. It's just a shell. It's really stiff. Try picking something up. Forget it. Okay, my last slide advertises the upcoming TV show Big Hero 6 in the fall. Make sure you watch it. So, if we're really lucky, I'll get a demo going over in the corner there. Any questions? Yeah, sure.
the slides.
How many?
Points for discussion, right here. So, number 1, amen. Number 9, hallelujah. But number 3, I mean, okay, you see the world, that's great, but the world is incredibly messy. Computer vision is not a solved problem, it's incredibly hard. Why take all this difficulty?
Ted said, computer vision solved, I gotta move on. I mean, that's what he said. I heard it, you all heard it, okay?
You detect, slip by optical flow. What if the object is textureless? What do you do then?
Lasers. So, we have basically ignored a really important aspect that we could be using, and that's active illumination at various frequencies to recover material properties. So Ted uses a geometric arrangement of a variety of LEDs to highlight basically small features of the thing. You don't have to just do that flat. You can actually do that with an angle of incidence. We can use arrangements like what is used in an optical mouse to basically create features. And these are small irregularities in the surface. It is true that you could make something that was so smooth and so featureless we couldn't do anything with it. But the real world, there are lots of sort of geometric features in addition to color features and other features. So if we went whole hog multimodal, I bet you'll never run into that situation.
Optical mice don't work on a lot of stuff. I was running into that just yesterday because I didn't have a pad with me, right? So that's a problem with them.
Okay, you're a pessimist. I'm an optimist.
Issues for discussion.
Okay, fine. I believe by using lots of different kinds of sensors, we will make up for the failures of any particular sensor. But that's just total optimism, faith. It's part of my belief structure.
So how human do it? Human also face all
I don't
noise.
care how humans do it. That is the mistake that we have made. It is totally ridiculous that we do not have optical sensors all over our body. Why evolution gave you a head and put your eyeballs there, I don't know. Clams have 100 eyeballs. Okay, they're very advanced. Horseshoe crabs have 14 eyeballs.
We have also more than 100 eyeballs in some other sense. It's not optical, but sensing. What you told, I am coming to that point. Sensing is important. What we are sensing, how we are sensing, we have to function. And in that case, we actually build up that robustness, region of interest, attention, all these already build up, but they are not optical.
I believe we're going to meet space aliens imminently, and they will have eyeballs all over their body.
But it is not the only way. There are other ways also.
I mean, you could make the argument that if half our brain is processing vision, we can't afford to have more eyeballs.
Yes. I am also coming to that point only.
Okay, but technology basically makes little tiny cameras, and in the old days, like 10 years ago, they had what are called image processing that did full optic flow in the camera. Now, because cell phones currently have their own GPUs, they've ripped out the image processor on most new imaging chips, and that's why I have to have little Raspberry Pi Zeros with a GPU on it to do any kind of calculation. But it's still a Raspberry Pi Zero. It's a $10 computer per camera. It's nothing.
Yeah, that it again comes. What is minimum required?
So, maybe we can take this discussion during the poster session.
Okay.
One more question.
Yeah.
There are some benefits for rigid stuff. For example, knowing where your fingers are and having all the computational tools to.
I missed the first few sentences. Are you being pessimistic or optimistic? You saying I don't know where my finger parts are?
Well, I said there are some direct benefit of doing things in a rigid regime. For example, knowing where your
Okay.
fingers are.
Baymax, the balloon guy, he's not rigid. He doesn't have any idea where his skin is.
That's an animation.
It's real to me, okay? So, fortunately, there's a lot of work in the computer vision community that basically says if we have a bunch of people holding cameras and we have access to all their video, we want to reconstruct 3D, so we do VR of the scene. And we don't know what the camera poses are. There are new algorithms that basically simultaneously reconstruct the camera pose of these bunch of cameras and the 3D scene. It's sort of super slam. You know, I don't actually have to know where all the cameras on my body are because I'll do super slam as well from vision.